All right, well, welcome everybody to the pre-launch of the first, or the inaugural, if you will, Entrepreneurship Research Idea Pitch Competition, which is a collaboration between USASBE, CCSBE, and our very special collaborator, Bow Valley College. And it is a great pleasure for me to introduce Craig Elias to you, who is at Bow Valley. And this is really his brainchild. I mean, I feel like I kind of went along for the ride in some ways, but this really, we were talking this morning, this has been a great collaborative and iterative process together. So I wanted to thank Craig very much for his leadership with this. So we are going, this is a pre-launch, so not all of the information will be given out today, but we're going to give out a quick snapshot and allow an opportunity for some questions at the end as well. So we'll get this going. All right, so there are some desired outcomes from this research idea pitch competition, okay? So we want to really dig down deep into the concept of impactful research. Interesting research ideas that may be publishable, or research that maybe typically would not be publishable, right? Maybe it's community-based research, or maybe it's talking about or trying to collect information about something that's already happened to really get an idea of if it worked or not, okay? So it can be replicated. But we really want to focus this research idea, these research ideas, on the impact of entrepreneurship education. We would love to see this be a collaboration between researchers and practitioners, because there's a lot of good, it's kind of bridging the gap between the two. Again, since it's not just publishable, it can be non-publishable stuff. And the types of areas that it can focus on are broad. So it can be in mindset, or it can be policy, or entrepreneurial outcomes. It really can be whatever our researchers are interested in, or whatever our participants are interested in. This is what we are interested in leveraging. So it can be new research, it can extend research that's already been done in some different ways, or it can just be research that you're interested in and haven't really had an opportunity to dig into yet. All right, so those are some of the desired outcomes. At the end of the day, as you know, USASBE is all about boldly advancing entrepreneurship education through research, teaching, and practice. So we're really trying to pull all of these things together. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Craig.
Thank you, Julie. It's funny, as we're going over these desired outcomes, I think about the time I spent teaching entrepreneurship at the University of Calgary, and there was always this slide at the beginning of every class: learning objectives, learning objectives. So it's kind of like, this is the objective. What are we trying to get done? So on top of everything Julie's talking about, the whole idea here is, how do we find a way to encourage people to participate in this competition? I have been running all kinds of different pitch competitions ever since I actually won. Hold on, unmute, there we go. So I've been running pitch competitions for quite a while, ever since I won one myself. And the one I won was actually $1 million US for a $1 billion idea competition. And I love competition because I find it creates a sense of urgency, and people push themselves a little bit more. They're a little more creative. So in this case, we're going to give away $3,000 to the first place winner, $1,500 and $750 to second and third. But there's also going to be a People's Choice Award. So if you got something that people like, you get a chance to go have your friends, and hopefully some of you have quite a few of them, to go vote for what you got on Pseudocracy. It's also a really good way to help your research get some exposure, even if you don't end up in the top 3. So who's eligible? Well, anybody who's a member of USASBE or CCSBE. If you attend the event or not, we'd like you to attend the event because you'll learn more, but at least one person on your team. So if you're not already a member of one of these 2 associations, then you need to find somebody to be on your team who is a member, so your team is eligible. So what is the opportunity? I think it's a really unique opportunity to create interest, an idea that you have for research, or maybe it's research that you already do. One of the things that you'll get by participating is you'll get access to some really hard to get to Canadian data that is the equivalent to what you might get in the US, but it's super hard to get a hold of. So it's an opportunity to be able to use Canadian data to maybe extrapolate the results of what you're talking about without actually having to get to US data. And I know it's not completely scientific, but it's as a starting point, it's the ability to document the potential impact of the research that you have. I don't know how Americans do it, but I know that as a Canadian, if I find some research that's American, but I can't find the Canadian version, I always divide it by 10 because the population is about 1/10 of in Canada, what it is in the United States. And it's also the ability to take a hypothesis you might already have, but you don't have data. You can use this data, maybe they then say, hey, this shows how big an impact we could really have. How do we find a way to go justify doing something with American data? Because what I found when I first tried to get access to the data that I'm going to share is what I was told is I would have to write a novel. When I say that, I mean like a really super long application. I then had to wait to get approved. If I got approved, I then had to get security clearance. I then would have to sign a confidentiality agreement. I would then have to get in a plane to fly 3/4 of the way across the country to be in Ottawa, Ontario, which is the capital of Canada, to be in a room because the computer is not attached to the internet. And while I'm spending time trying to manipulate their database, I would have to be monitored by a staff member of Statistics Canada. And when I thought about all this time it would take me to get access to this data, and I'm a much better talker than a typer, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get access to that data. And as I was actually lamenting about this problem, in fact, I was even in Austin, Texas, talking to someone about this problem, they're like, well, I have a friend. I'm like, who's your friend? His name's Anil. I'm like, well, who's Anil? It turns out Anil is the chief statistician for Stats Canada. So now, instead of having to go through all this process, by being introduced to him, I found a way to have one of his staff members do the work. I then just paid him the cost of that staff member doing the work, and I have the ability to then share the data. So if you use this data in something that you put into the competition, the only requirement is you have to put this disclaimer at the bottom of this page in the presentation of the research that you actually use. So what are some of the important dates? What's the schedule for this? So today we're doing an information session. On January 6th at the USASBE conference, we'll do a kickoff. We'll then have an online Q&A session on January 15th. From the day you learn of it to the day you have to submit something, you have 30 days or a month to get your submission in. We then have some judges, and I'll share some information on the judges. We then have a couple of weeks to go through all the submissions, pick the top 3 while you're also now trying to get people to vote for you on Seedocracy. So the judging rubric is going to focus on a few key things, and we'll release the full rubric on the 6th. But is this research or research idea feasible? Is it going to have an impact? Can we do something with this? Is it actionable? Is it something that's easy for other people to understand? Maybe they want to try and find a way to support it monetarily or otherwise. And is the research transferable to entrepreneurship education? And one of the things I've learned about entrepreneurship education, when I first started teaching entrepreneurship, the question that was asked of me is, can entrepreneurship be taught? And my argument is, I don't think that's the right question. I think the question is, can entrepreneurship be learned? And I think entrepreneurship can be learned. So what I'm hoping is some of this research that comes out will talk about maybe some of the ways that entrepreneurship can actually be learned. We have some really cool judges. This is just the first 6. We're aiming pretty high to go get a few more judges. These are the people who are going to have a look at these applications and use the scoring rubric. And I'm a stickler for this. We're going to use the scoring rubric to score as objectively as possible. Nothing drives me crazier than everybody submits all their scores. Then you end up with a top 3 or top 5. And then the judges then go, which one do I like? For me, what I want to try and find a way to make sure we do is make sure the numbers judge who's actually going to win. So this is my contact information. That's my email address on my cell phone. My suggestion, if you have questions, and we'll get to questions, and then I'll share some more information about the data set. But if you have specific questions, I know some of you might want to email me. My hard part sometimes is I get hundreds of emails every single day. In fact, the last time I checked, I have 198,000 unread emails in my inbox. If you want a quicker response, you're always welcome to call or text me. That is my cell phone number. So if you want to take a picture maybe of this slide or write down my cell phone number or my email address. So it's my first initial last name, C. Elias, at bowvalleycollege.ca. So what I wanted to do at this point was just see what questions people might have before we talk about the data set that we will make available to those who are participating or competing. Does anybody have any questions? Do you want to unmute yourself or maybe put them in the chat? I'll see if I can find the chat, Julie. Hold on.
You can look at it too.
Yeah. Does anybody
Hey, Craig.
Hey,
Craig.
Caroline or Caroline?
Hey there. It's Caroline. Thank you for asking. Is there a format that you are looking for? It seems like I read said something about a 3-page map.
Craig, were you able to hear all of
And
Caroline's?
So far, all I've heard is
Are you
max, a 3-page max.
Yeah, Caroline, you might want to write your question in the chat. I believe the question has to do with what's the format for the submissions. And Craig, go ahead. I've got that information, but if you want to answer that, you can go ahead.
So you have more information than I do. All I know is, yes, there's a written piece, but there's also a video because that's the pitch part.
That is correct. That is correct. So it's not a blind submission. There will be a video that is required. I believe the maximum for that video is 2 minutes. And there will be a written component of it as well, which is, I believe, a maximum of 3 pages. And that will be submitted on AwardForce, which is what everybody used for the conference submissions as well.
And we'll make sure come the day that we launch the competition, you'll be able to see the submission page, what it looks like and everything else. Any other questions?
Yes, hello. I was wondering if this is expected to be an idea pitch for research or something that's already in progress or close to being done.
Yeah, so it really is supposed to be impactful ideas. So the intent of it is to be new things, right? It can be extending something that you're already doing or what have you. But if you're like wrapping it up, I don't know that like, here's one thing, we're not going to know that, but it may make a difference on, current events or other types of things. I mean, we're not going to know if it's something that you've been working on forever. We're not going to, dig in and investigate how far along is the research. But I do think the intent is to kind of look at things in with fresh eyes. And as Craig mentioned, I mean, the data set's going to be available. You don't have to use it, but it really will spark, I believe, some really insightful questions. So
well, and that's what I was wondering. So if it's look at this data and come up with a new idea to use this particular data, is that kind of the preference?
My take on it, and Craig can kind of speak to this too, the research, the data that's available is meant to spark ideas. You don't have to use it, but I think that when Craig shows you some of the data, it probably will spark some questions.
No, I'm excited about seeing that. No, I was just wondering because the way you would present a new research idea, right? It's more about the idea versus if you're farther along in a project, then you'd present research methods, data, that kind of stuff. So it's more about the idea for research. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And it might be something, so just Julie's going to have to put the guardrails on me for a minute here, maybe, okay? And I'm okay with that, is that if you've got something you're working on and this then helps you be able to, I want to find a way to put some numbers to something you put numbers to in the past. So I had a hypothesis a while ago. The reason I went away and got this data is I had a hypothesis about the impact of students becoming entrepreneurs when they graduate instead of waiting until 44. So while I'd already had this hypothesis, I didn't have any data that allowed me to document the economic impact of something I was thinking of. Does that answer the question, or does that muddy the waters, Brianna?
Oh no, that's helpful. I was just curious kind of what, if it's more of an idea thing or not. And then is, as far as the data, because if, for example, I have access to NSF data, so I actually have a lot of data that I haven't done projects on yet. So would it be used, even if it's new, use something like that? Or is the preference to come up with ideas for this Canadian data set?
No, so you don't, if you have access to the equivalent data set somewhere else or something else similar, what we're trying to do is to say, hey, as a researcher, sometimes data is the
Yes.
hardest thing to get your hands on. Like, it took me, wow, I don't even want to say how long. It took me a long time to even find this database that had all the data that I wanted. And then to find out that I can't get access to it unless I want to wait a year and write a novel and then all of a sudden do something else. So if you have access to data already, go crazy.
Okay. No, I appreciate that though. And you guys giving us, so is this you guys giving us access to this new data set? Because that, I mean, that's amazing.
That, yeah, so on the day, January 6th, when we do this, that's when we'll make access to this data available. There'll be some sort of form you'll fill in that tells us your competition, you're using the data for the competition. At that point, you'll get an email of sorts, whether it's automatic or otherwise. You'll then get a link directly to the spreadsheet, and I'll share with you in a couple of minutes what that spreadsheet actually contains.
I love that. What a great opportunity. Thank you.
Welcome. Other questions? Okay, anything in the chat there, Brittany? Nothing in the chat? Okay, here's the data. So the data set in Canada is called the Canadian Employers Dynamics Database. It takes every individual's personal tax filings, every corporation's or business tax filings, and their additional summary files. It's data from 2001 to 2015. So there's pre-recession, recession, post-recession, and it's 0.5 petabyte of data that's in there in total. So I've sucked out what I wanted to use for something I'm working on. So if at some point this data is not of use, there might be an opportunity to collaborate on research later on, and for me to go away and get different data. But the data that I asked was for incorporated businesses, so no unincorporated businesses. And Julie, I'm assuming the word incorporated is the same term I would use in the US, it transfers?
It's a good question. We'll figure that out before the launch date. So I would say versus sole proprietorships, probably.
Yeah, sole proprietorships, correct. But we wanted businesses that have at least 2 owners. And then we took a look at all those businesses owned by those between the age of 20 and 80. And we asked for data on their survival rates of the business based upon the age of the primary owner, the number of companies based upon that age that there are all the way across the entire country, the average revenue, average profit, and average number of employees. We then put that data in 3 cohorts, 01 to 05, pre-recession, 06 to 10, during the last recession, not this one, and then stuff that's afterwards. And when I did some of this analysis, one of the things that I found super interesting when I went through and looked at the number of businesses owned by those between the ages of 35 and 50, for example, during these 3 different timeframes, it turns out the number of businesses owned by those over 35 and under 50 doubled during the recessionary time, which I was super intrigued by. So this is what it looks like. By every age, we'll tell you how many firms there are by age, their average revenue, profit, and number of employees. We don't go into any more granular data by North American classification codes, by geography or anything else, because as soon as that number 32 gets to be less than 10, we get no data. And the reason they don't give us data is the perspective is that we might be able to actually identify which business it was or is when there's fewer than 10 people in that sample size. So it's broad, Canada-wide. So this is the age, right? How many there are, revenue, profit, and employees. We then have survival rates. So again, 2 or more employees, the survival rate for up to 15 years from the age of 20 to 85. Here's the thing that I'm amazed at. If you look at the last row on this one, so businesses started by those that are 80, that half of them are still around 15 years later, and that person is still the shareholder. I don't know how they do that, but this is what the data says. And what I love about this data is it's historical, it's backwards looking, it's based upon hundreds of thousands of records. So I think most people have a hard time saying, well, this actually isn't correct, because this is work actually done by Statistics Canada and one of their senior economists. And this is the second time he's done this for me. What I got this time around, which I didn't get the last time around, is the actual number of businesses started during that time frame by each person of each age. Again, how many of those businesses have survived? Because in the past, all I got was a percentage. Knowing the number for me now all of a sudden opens up all kinds of other doors. One of the things that I'm actually working on right now as a way for me to use this data is that in Calgary, we're trying to find a way to get to 1,000 tech firms within 10 years. And we're looking at different firms of different sizes and trying to do a prediction of how many people need to start a business in order for us to get to that number of 1,000 tech firms. So we're able to use this data, then be able to say, okay, if we need to have 1,000 companies start so that within 10 years, this many are around, so we accomplish these goals. So this is what the data looks like. Does anybody?
And we've got a question from the chat from Caesar. He's asking, is this data set longitudinal? In other words, can I select the records of the same employee or employer across multiple years?
So it's to prevent being able to identify a single individual, it's aggregated, or what I might call metadata. So no, we can't track a person, because there would be tens of millions of records that would then be involved in that whole process. Now, it doesn't mean that maybe at some point after this, we want to try and find a way to do something different. So you said it was Caesar that was asking the question?
Yeah, Caesar.
So maybe there's something for next year or starting sometime in the new year that Caesar and I might want to work on together, and we can go away and ask if we can get access to that data to be able to validate some sort of hypothesis. But in this case, no. And if it makes it any easier, Julie, I could actually bring up the spreadsheet and people can actually see it. Would it make a difference, do you think?
Well, I think the big thing, if people are interested, they definitely should talk with you. But I think the big thing is that, again, because the data set is meant to be kind of sparking a spark of questions, right? Sparking of thoughts. We do anticipate that there will be some things that they'll say, ooh, if I had X or Y or Z, or can it do this, or can we ask for this? This is exactly the point. There may be other ways of bringing in data from other sources, or going back and asking for additional types of data in the future. And that's also part of it. We're happy to help with that too, if we can.
And given what I'm doing around helping students become entrepreneurs, I have a dollar amount every year to be able to spend on data for research purposes. So maybe there's something we can do, like Julie says, in the future.
Any other questions?
$11:55, like almost right on time.
Pretty good, Craig. I mean, and you're a talker too, man. I mean, come on.
I'll take that as a compliment.
It is.
So any questions before we go? Anything in the chat, Brittany? No? Okay. I see somebody, but I can't tell who they are.
Well, this is wonderful. Again, more details and the official launch will take place at USASBE 2021, Be Boldly Unscripted, on day 2, which is January 6th. And Craig will be there with more information, and we cannot wait to launch the official inaugural, I almost said first, but inaugural research idea pitch competition.
And if you forget all this stuff, if you can't reach me, if you just go to LinkedIn, I've been on LinkedIn longer than most people. I'm user 3,956 out of 700 million users. You type in Craig Elias on LinkedIn, hopefully I'll be the first thing you see. And I will, of course, on those pictures like I am today, I'll be in a bright orange golf shirt.
Nice. All right, this will be available on USASBE's YouTube channel on Wednesday. So if anybody missed part of it, it'll be there.
Julie, Brittany, thank you very much. Everybody else, Get in touch if you have any questions. Look forward to seeing everybody on the 6th. Stay healthy and have a Merry Christmas.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, Craig.
You.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy holidays. Thank you.
Happy holidays.